They told you discipline is the cure. Wake up early. Grind. Stick to the plan no matter how you feel. Don't complain. Don't slow down. Don't question it, just execute. They promised you that if you could force yourself to be consistent long enough, your turn would come. And you believed it. You dragged yourself out of bed when you were exhausted. You pushed through work you hated because you thought that's what winners do. You followed routines like commandments because you were told routine equals greatness. You kept yourself on a leash, and you called that leash discipline. You told yourself that makes you strong. But here's what someone like Machiavelli would tell you. That's not strength, that's obedience. That's loyalty to a system that was never built to make you powerful. Here's the part nobody says out loud. Discipline makes you predictable. And predictable people are easy to control. Look around you. The people who hold real power, the ones who can't be pushed, can't be manipulated, can't be quietly replaced. They're not predictable. They're not rigid. They're not married to routines. They're dangerous because you never really know what they're going to do next. That's the first uncomfortable truth. Discipline is not power. Discipline by itself is a leash. If you actually want to be dangerous, if you want to be untouchable, you cannot just be disciplined. You have to be strategic. There's a big difference. Discipline is only valuable when you're the one designing the game, when you're choosing the target, controlling the timing, setting the rules. But most people aren't doing that. Most people are disciplined inside a system someone else already designed. And that means their discipline is just compliance with someone else's plan. Think about why you wake up early. Is it because you perform better at that hour? Or is it because you read somewhere that high performers wake up at 5 a.m.? Think about why you keep forcing yourself to finish projects you secretly hate. Is it because they're giving you leverage, money, opportunity, position? Or is it just because you feel guilty if you quit halfway? Be honest. When was the last time you asked yourself, does this even still matter? Before doing it again? That's the problem. People worship routine. They follow a plan even when the plan stopped working 6 months ago. They treat consistency itself like a virtue. Machiavelli would laugh at that. Because to him, staying loyal to a plan that no longer works is not discipline. It's self-sabotage dressed up as nobility. It's not strong to keep doing something that isn't creating power. It's not honorable to keep pushing toward an outcome that doesn't benefit you. It's not virtuous to hold yourself to rules that don't protect you or elevate you. That's not discipline. That's mental captivity that feels productive. Now, imagine a different mindset. Imagine someone who doesn't worship discipline. He uses it. This person doesn't wake up early because a podcast told him winners wake up early. He wakes up early when early gives him an edge. And he sleeps in when recovery gives him an edge. He can sprint when speed matters. He can disappear when silence matters. He can pause when patience matters. He can attack when pressure matters. He is not consistent to feel good about being consistent. He is consistent when consistency serves him, and the moment it doesn't, he drops it without apology. That is the difference between a soldier and a ruler. A soldier is disciplined. He follows orders, he follows routine, he obeys structure. A ruler is strategic. He changes the plan the moment the plan stops giving him power. Ask yourself which one you've actually been trained to become. Because here's how discipline quietly kills your power. First, discipline teaches obedience, not awareness. When you get hooked on routine, you stop questioning the outcome. You don't ask, is this still the smartest move? You just say, this is what I do. You stop scanning the environment. You stop noticing that the situation changed. You don't adapt. You just persist. And persistence in the wrong direction is not grit. It's slow failure. Second, discipline praises endurance instead of intelligence. Anybody can grind. Anybody can keep going. That's not rare. That's not special. That's not threatening. What's rare is knowing exactly when to pivot, when to quit, when to redirect energy into a lane where you'll actually win. That's intelligence. That's leverage. That's threat. Discipline just keeps you moving. Strategy decides where you move. Third, discipline can mute your instincts. A lot of people don't like to hear this, but you've done it. You've ignored the feeling in your gut because it didn't line up with what was on the schedule. You pushed forward because that's the plan, even though something in you said, wait, not right now. And because you forced yourself to keep going, you stepped right past a signal that would have made you dangerous. That is how people lose games they could have won. Machiavelli's most dangerous students, the people who actually win, don't ask, did I stick to the habit? They ask, did that move get me closer to leverage? Not, did I check off the box today? Not, did I do the morning routine? Not, did I hit all my habits this week? But, did today increase my control, my options, my positioning, my power? If the answer is no, the move is deleted. No matter how good it looked on paper, no matter how impressive it would have sounded to tell other people about it, no matter how many days in a row they've already done it. Because here's another brutal truth. The illusion of virtue is one of the easiest traps to manipulate you with. And discipline, especially public, aesthetic, Instagram discipline, is one of the most seductive illusions of all. It feels like progress. It looks like progress. People clap for it. But if it's not producing leverage, it's not progress. It's theater. Look at the world for a second. You'll see a whole class of men who are doing everything right. They wake up early. They journal. They read. They track their macros. They eat clean. They're on the grind. They're locked in. They're disciplined. And yet, they are still replaceable, still ignored, still working inside someone else's system, still starving for respect from people who outrank them. That's not an accident. That's design. Systems of control love disciplined men. Love them. Why? Because disciplined men are predictable. They show up. They execute. They don't complain. They don't resist. You can forecast them. You can manage them. You can reward them just enough to keep them moving without ever handing them real power. That's why the disciplined worker is celebrated in public but quietly kept out of the rooms where decisions are actually made. He's ideal for the machine. He'll die for the plan, even if the plan was never written for him. Now contrast that with someone they genuinely worry about. He doesn't repeat the same visible pattern. He doesn't broadcast his routine. He doesn't say, "This is my exact daily formula," because he doesn't want you to map him. He follows momentum instead, not ritual. He looks for openings, not validation. He doesn't feel guilty dropping a plan mid-stride if it stops giving him leverage. He pivots instantly, and because you cannot predict what he'll do, you cannot control what he'll do. That is threat. That is power. That is why Machiavelli draws a hard line between respect and fear. Discipline might earn you respect. Strategy is what makes you feared. And in power games, respect without fear is decoration. It's applause. It's a pat on the head. It is not protection. So if you're waking up every day just to keep a streak alive, if you're doing things that no longer produce any real return, if you're calling it discipline just so you don't have to face the discomfort of changing strategy, then understand something ugly. You're not in control. You're being controlled. The game isn't won by the man who works the hardest. It's won by the one who reads the map the fastest, the one who bends when others freeze, who breaks his own plan before the plan breaks him. Discipline doesn't make you dangerous. Control does. And control isn't about brute force. It's about flexibility used with precision. The world claps for the disciplined man, but it's the strategic man they whisper about. Because while the disciplined man perfects his habits, the strategic man perfects leverage. He doesn't waste time trying to become efficient at life. He's trying to bend life toward his will. That's the real Machiavellian separation. Discipline builds order. Strategy builds power. And here's where most people slip without realizing it. Discipline feels like freedom at first. You set your alarm, make your plan, stick to your diet, and suddenly life feels clean, structured, under control. But over time, that same structure hardens. It becomes doctrine. You start to fear breaking it. You start to worship it. And once that happens, your freedom has already turned into a cage. You built a habit. Then the habit built your identity. And then your identity became your prison. I'm the guy who never skips a day. I'm the one who always finishes what he starts. I'm the man who pushes through no matter what. Sounds noble, doesn't it? But Machiavelli would look at you calmly and say, that makes you predictable. That makes you vulnerable. That makes you mine. Because once someone can guess your next move, you've already lost. That's what most people miss. When you become known for your consistency, your enemy doesn't need to fight you. He just needs to wait. He can track your rhythm, anticipate your timing, prepare for your strike before you even throw it. The dangerous man is the opposite. He's disciplined when it's time to focus, but he's not loyal to any single pattern. He breaks his own rhythm before someone else learns it. He sees rules as tools temporary, situational, disposable. If the plan stops working, he burns it. If the system loses leverage, he drops it mid-step. If a new path opens, he pivots instantly. No guilt, no hesitation, no nostalgia. Because power doesn't reward the one who sticks to the plan. It rewards the one who rewrites it in real time. Let's get practical for a second. These are the 3 biggest traps discipline sets for men, and what a Machiavellian mind would do instead. Trap 1. The morning routine addiction. You know the drill: wake up early, cold shower, meditate, journal, gym, smoothie, same steps every morning. You feel invincible because everything is dialed in. But here's the question. Did that routine actually move you closer to power today? Or did it just help you feel like you're in control? You didn't think, you followed. You didn't adapt, you obeyed. That's not strength. That's automation. Machiavelli would say, every morning should begin with a calculation, not a ritual. Ask yourself, what matters most today? What action shifts leverage in my favor right now? If that means skipping the gym to make a crucial call, do it. If it means ignoring your journal to prepare for a negotiation, do it. If it means sleeping in because your sharpest thinking will happen at 2 p.m., do it. You're not here to impress your planner. You're here to win the day. Trap 2. The streak addiction. I haven't missed a day in 100 days. I've been consistent for a year. That sounds powerful, but it's pride disguised as productivity. Machiavelli would call it emotional blackmail against yourself. You've turned discipline into a hostage situation. You can't stop, not because it still matters, but because your ego can't handle breaking the streak. That's not control. That's compulsion. The disciplined man says, I can't stop now. I've come too far. The strategic man says, if stopping now gives me an advantage, I'll stop instantly. Consistency is power only when it serves your mission. The moment it becomes vanity, abandon it. Because every day spent protecting a routine that no longer pays dividends is a day your rivals are overtaking you. Trap 3. The finish what you started lie. They told you quitting makes you weak, that you must always see it through. But Machiavelli didn't finish broken plans, he replaced them. He didn't treat persistence as sacred. He treated results as sacred. He moved fast, pivoted faster, and abandoned anything that stopped creating momentum. That doesn't make you unreliable. It makes you dangerous. Because while the disciplined man is pushing a dead cart uphill, you've already switched vehicles and passed him by. The world rewards people who complete the right things, not those who complete everything. This is where the Machiavellian mind fully separates from the obedient one. He doesn't serve structure. He weaponizes it. He uses systems only as long as they produce measurable power, then discards them like spent ammo. He even practices breaking his own habits on purpose, just to stay unpredictable. Discipline is not evil, but blind discipline is self-hypnosis. And the more you repeat it, the deeper the trance becomes. The man who can break his rhythm at will, that man cannot be trapped. You can't track him, time him, or predict him. And that uncertainty is the root of his strength. So ask yourself, are you being consistent because it's working, or because it's what you're used to? Are you following discipline to move forward, or to feel safe inside the illusion of control? Are you proud of how long you've stuck with your system, even though that system hasn't built anything real in months? If you answered yes to any of that, you're not being disciplined, you're being managed. Because discipline is only power when it's tied to results. Otherwise, it's a leash you handcrafted and locked around your own neck. That's why Machiavelli never wrote books about motivation or grind. He didn't glorify consistency. He glorified adaptation. He admired foresight, timing, psychological agility, and control. Because in the real game of power, the man who can follow a plan is useful, but the man who can abandon it at the perfect moment is untouchable. Here's what that looks like in everyday life. A disciplined man says, "I'll keep going no matter what." A strategic man says, "I'll keep going as long as it's giving me leverage." A disciplined man says, "I never break my rules." A strategic man says, "I write new rules whenever the old ones stop serving me." Discipline builds willpower. Strategy builds dominance. And dominance always beats effort. This is why the world feels safer praising discipline. It's easy to measure, easy to manage, easy to sell. But unpredictability, that scares people. It means you can't be programmed. It means they can't anticipate you. It means they have to respect you differently, because when they can't track your rhythm, they have to stay alert. They second-guess themselves. They waste energy trying to read you. That confusion, that tension, that's control. That's the quiet power Machiavelli pointed to. Not obedience, not perfection, but leverage through unreadability. The disciplined man looks consistent. The dangerous man looks unpredictable. And in the hierarchy of power, the unpredictable one always sits higher. Here's why this idea threatens so many people. Because everything we've been taught, from school to work to self-help culture, is built on one commandment: stay consistent. Wake up early. Follow the process. Never quit. Repeat. That advice sounds noble, but it was never meant to create rulers. It was meant to create workers. Reliable, predictable, easily managed workers. People who don't need direction because they're already programmed to obey. Machiavelli would call them perfect citizens. Productive, loyal, safe, and completely replaceable. But you're not supposed to be safe. You're supposed to be effective. To live strategically means you stop worshiping order and start mastering timing. You stop fearing inconsistency and start using it. Because what looks like inconsistency on the outside, flexibility, disruption, sharp pivots, is often control on the inside. That's the paradox most people never see. They think discipline equals freedom. But real freedom starts when you stop needing discipline to function. When you can move without a plan and still move with precision. When your sharpness doesn't depend on structure. When you can break your rhythm and still land on your feet, that's when you're actually free. Because if your stability depends on a routine, that means your routine owns you. Machiavelli warned about this long before modern self-help ever existed. He said, "A man who cannot change his nature when the times change will perish." In other words, if you can't break your pattern, the pattern will break you. So, let's get real. How much of what you call discipline is actually fear? Fear of losing control, fear of looking lazy, fear of being seen as inconsistent, fear of being judged. Most people cling to discipline not because it's working, but because it protects them from uncertainty. It gives them an illusion of safety, but safety doesn't build empires. Safety doesn't create dominance. Safety just keeps you in line. That's why the dangerous man doesn't try to appear consistent. He's not here to impress anyone. He's here to control outcomes. He learns to weaponize inconsistency. He disappears when people expect him to show up. He speaks when they expect silence. He pauses when they expect pressure. He strikes when they assume he's done. He controls perception, and that's how he controls people. Confusion breeds power. When people can't map your rhythm, they have to watch you closer. They waste energy guessing. They get nervous. They hesitate. And that hesitation gives you space to move. That's why Machiavelli said, "A prince must learn how not to be good and use that knowledge when necessary." He wasn't talking about morality. He was talking about flexibility, about the power of breaking your own pattern before it becomes your cage. Now, let's look deeper at how discipline can quietly steal your sharpness. Discipline rewards repetition, but repetition dulls instinct. At first, routines strengthen you. They create focus, order, consistency. But once they're mastered, they start numbing the part of you that reacts, the part that senses danger, opportunity, or shift. You stop listening to your gut. You stop scanning for signals. You start forcing yourself to push through everything, even when your instincts are screaming, "Not this move, not this time." That's when discipline becomes blindness, and blindness, no matter how productive, is weakness. The most powerful minds are always watching the terrain. They never assume the map still matches the land. They never assume the plan still applies. They test, they adjust, they disrupt. That's why power is fluid. It's not something you lock in. It's something you constantly reclaim. The disciplined man says, "I just have to keep going." The Machiavellian says, "I'll go until the move stops paying off, and then I'll pivot before anyone notices." That's not chaos. That's control. Discipline keeps you busy. Strategy keeps you dangerous. And that's the problem with most self-improvement advice. It glorifies effort, not leverage. It teaches you to repeat, not to adapt. To build habits, not awareness. But Machiavelli didn't care about effort. He cared about outcomes. He knew that in the real world, the man who works hardest is rarely the one who wins. It's the one who moves when everyone else is still calculating. Because while disciplined men are perfecting their systems, the strategic man is quietly bending the system around himself. That's the kind of power that can't be taught in a routine. It can only be learned through ruthless awareness, by studying people, timing, and psychology more than your to-do list. And that's another thing discipline blinds you to people. When you're too locked into your own schedule, you stop reading the room. You miss shifts in mood, energy, alliances. You're so focused on staying on track that you fail to notice the track has already changed. Power doesn't live inside a checklist. It lives inside timing and perception. You can't calculate that with a journal or a timer. You can only sense it, and sensing requires space. Space that blind discipline fills with noise. The Machiavellian mind keeps that space open. It never gets addicted to motion. It's comfortable pausing, recalibrating, waiting for the moment that matters. That's why he wins. He moves less, but every move lands with precision. And when he breaks his rhythm, it's never random. It's psychological warfare. He's not erratic, he's unreadable. He's not lazy, he's selective. He's not inconsistent, he's calculated. That's the art of strategic inconsistency, the kind of unpredictability that commands respect without ever asking for it. Because in every power dynamic, whether business, politics, or relationships, the predictable one always loses. If they know your pattern, they can predict your limits. If they can predict your limits, they can trap you. If they can trap you, they can control you. That's why Machiavelli taught that a ruler must learn how to disguise his intentions. In our world, that means learning how to break your own pattern before anyone else decodes it. If people think you always respond immediately, delay. If they think you're always composed, snap once. If they think you'll always show up, disappear. Every disruption resets the balance. Every deviation keeps you in control. Because when they can't read you, they can't play you. That's what makes strategy more powerful than discipline. It's dynamic. It lives and breathes. It adjusts to the moment. And when the world thinks you've fallen off your routine, what they can't see is that you've simply stepped into a new position, one they didn't prepare for. By the time they catch up, you've already moved again. That's not chaos. That's power disguised as unpredictability. Discipline teaches you to control yourself. Strategy teaches you to control the game. That's the difference Machiavelli lived by. Discipline says, I'll keep going no matter what. Strategy says, I'll stop the second this no longer serves my outcome, and I'll strike again when the timing favors me. Discipline builds willpower. Strategy builds leverage. And in every arena, politics, business, power, leverage always beats effort. That's why this truth offends so many people, because effort is easy to glorify. Effort is easy to measure. Effort looks noble, but power doesn't care how noble you look. Power rewards whoever sees the angles others ignore. The world doesn't teach you that. It trains you to obey rhythms that keep you predictable. It gives you systems, morning routines, and grind culture not to make you free, but to make you manageable. And when you start breaking that rhythm, people panic. They'll say you're inconsistent, lazy, reckless, but that's only because they can't control someone they can't predict. Understand this. Machiavelli never said chaos is strength. He said controlled disruption is strength. He never glorified randomness. He glorified adaptation. He didn't say abandon discipline. He said use discipline, then abandon it the moment it stops serving you. When discipline creates mastery, keep it. When discipline creates leverage, keep it. But when discipline becomes a ritual that others can map, a cage you're proud to stay inside, destroy it. Because no system, no matter how efficient, is worth your freedom to pivot. Here's what most people can't see. Every rigid routine eventually becomes predictable. Every predictable pattern eventually becomes exploitable. And once others can forecast your next move, you've already lost the advantage. The Machiavellian mind refuses to be trapped like that. He breaks patterns before they solidify. He shifts direction before the terrain changes. He burns bridges when staying would dull his edge. He's not addicted to being seen as consistent. He's addicted to being effective. If you want to see the real-world proof, look at history. The people who dominated their era were never the ones who simply worked hardest. They were the ones who mastered timing. They moved when others froze. They paused when others panicked. They waited while everyone else rushed and then struck with precision. That's strategy. It's not just effort. It's foresight, awareness, timing, and the ability to detach from your own patterns when necessary. Because let's be honest, if your entire sense of control depends on your schedule, then you don't own your discipline. Your discipline owns you. You've built a cage so polished, you forgot it's still a cage. That's why Machiavelli didn't praise routine. He praised readiness. He understood that every disciplined man eventually becomes predictable, and predictable men can be managed, manipulated, or replaced. When you say, "I always do X," your enemies smile, because they now know how to trap you. When you say, "I never break my rules," they smile wider, because that means they only need to create a situation where following your own rule destroys you. And when you take pride in being consistent no matter what, they already know your blind spot, your need to appear reliable. That's why Machiavelli warned, the man who cannot change his course is already defeated. Because in real power dynamics, predictability is vulnerability. Now look at how this plays out in life. You've seen people obsess over streaks, 100 days of discipline, 365 days of consistency. It looks powerful, but it's pride disguised as weakness. They've traded adaptability for the illusion of progress. They don't dare stop because they've built their entire identity around never stopping. And that's what makes them easy to predict, and therefore easy to control. Machiavelli would call that self-imposed slavery. Not physical chains, but mental ones. Chains made of pride, habit, and routine. The strategic man lives differently. He uses discipline the way a soldier uses a weapon, precisely, tactically, only when it's the right move. He doesn't wake up to fulfill a schedule. He wakes up to survey the battlefield, to read the tension in the air, to sense the shift in power. If the plan from yesterday no longer applies today, he erases it without hesitation. He doesn't cling to yesterday's victories or rituals. He doesn't say, "But I've come this far," and he says, "If this no longer creates leverage, it's over." That's what keeps him dangerous, because when the disciplined man panics after his plan collapses, the Machiavellian smiles. That's when the game begins. He's built for volatility. He thrives in disruption. He's trained to pivot faster than others can react. That's why chaos destroys the disciplined, but fuels the strategic. Machiavelli didn't build empires through routine. He built them through readiness. Readiness means your power doesn't come from the schedule. It comes from your awareness, your detachment, and your ability to act at the exact right moment. The disciplined man says, "I must follow my process." The strategic man says, "My process follows me." So here's the question that will expose the truth. If someone stripped away your routines, your rituals, your schedule, your structure, would you still move with precision? Or would you freeze? Would you panic without your structure? Or would you adapt? If your power depends on the structure, your power isn't real. It's rented. And the moment life shakes that structure, you'll crumble with it. The Machiavellian doesn't rely on the system. He studies it, uses it, then reshapes it to his will. He never becomes loyal to the process. His loyalty is to the outcome. And when the environment changes, he changes faster. That's why when others call him inconsistent, he's already 5 moves ahead. Because consistency might make you admirable, but adaptability makes you untouchable. To be Machiavellian is to master rhythm without being enslaved by it. to hold patterns loosely so you can drop them instantly. That's what real power looks like. The ability to stay in motion without being predictable. The world doesn't give power to the most disciplined man. It gives it to the man who can rewrite his own rhythm while everyone else is still trying to keep theirs. The disciplined man moves in straight lines. The strategic man moves like smoke, shifting, expanding, reshaping. Impossible to grasp. When the world expects you to grind harder, learn to move smarter. When they tell you to stay the course, learn to bend the course. That's the Machiavellian art, to remain unreadable, because once they can't read you, they can't reach you. Here's the final truth, the one that flips everything you were taught. Discipline isn't the peak of power, it's the entry point. A useful tool at first, but a dangerous prison when worshipped. Machiavelli would call discipline a weapon, sharp, effective, but never sacred. Because the moment you start identifying with it, you stop using it and start serving it. You begin to obey your own routines like laws. You start chasing consistency instead of victory. You call it strength, but it's really obedience disguised as self-control. That's how the world traps strong minds. It teaches them to admire their own predictability. Wake up early. Follow the plan. Repeat. Be proud of how consistent you are. But the system loves that because predictable men are easy to manage. They work hard, stay loyal, and never ask if the path still leads anywhere. They're disciplined and harmless. The truth. Discipline makes you efficient inside someone else's design. It keeps the machine running. It rewards obedience, not originality. That's why the world praises disciplined men in public, but uses them in private. They're reliable, never dangerous. Machiavelli didn't want to be reliable. He wanted to be unreadable, because the unreadable man, the man no one can map, holds the only real kind of power. Unpredictability. Discipline builds order, but order builds predictability, and predictability kills leverage. The strategic man uses discipline the way a general uses formation, temporarily. He knows when to move in lines and when to break formation altogether. He knows when control becomes constraint. He can be relentless when momentum demands it. He can be silent when stillness builds tension. He can vanish when the world expects presence and strike when they've stopped watching. He's not bound to any rhythm. He creates rhythm. That's why Machiavelli said the prince must learn to act against virtue when necessary. He wasn't glorifying evil. He was glorifying flexibility, the ability to break your own pattern before the world does it for you. Because every routine becomes a map, and every map becomes a trap. Once people can predict your next move, they don't need to fight you. They can simply wait for you to repeat yourself. That's how discipline fails the powerful. It makes them visible. The disciplined man says, "I'm consistent." The Machiavellian says, "I'm unreadable." The disciplined man says, "I always show up." The Machiavellian says, "I show up when it matters most." The disciplined man says, "I never quit." The Machiavellian says, "I pivot the second quitting gives me the upper hand." That's why the strategic mind wins where others grind endlessly. He's not addicted to effort. He's addicted to effectiveness. Because power doesn't reward motion. It rewards leverage. And leverage comes from being flexible enough to act when others are still adjusting. Think about the modern world. Everyone's obsessed with morning routines, streaks, and habits. It looks like control, but it's control turned inward, against yourself. You become the perfect soldier for your own self-imposed system. Machiavelli would laugh. He'd say, "You've replaced your ruler with your ritual." Because when you can't skip the routine owns you. That's why the Machiavellian mind practices strategic inconsistency. He'll break his rhythm intentionally, not to rebel, but to reset his power. If people expect him to reply immediately, he delays. If they think he'll always be calm, he erupts once. If they expect his presence, he disappears. Every break in pattern reclaims control. Every deviation creates confusion. And confusion is a form of fear, the kind that keeps people on edge around you. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said fear lasts longer than love. Fear is born from unpredictability, and unpredictability is born from strategic control, not from chaos, but from mastery of rhythm. That's why the Machiavellian thrives in volatility. When systems collapse, the disciplined man panics. The Machiavellian smirks, because chaos erases everyone's routine, but not his readiness. He doesn't say, "This isn't how I planned it." He says, "Perfect. Now the field is even." He was never dependent on predictability anyway. The disciplined man follows a system. The Machiavellian builds and breaks systems as he pleases. He understands this law of power. When you're the only one comfortable breaking your pattern, you control the tempo. Tempo is everything. Tempo decides who attacks, who reacts, who dominates. That's why Machiavelli admired leaders who could turn structure into strategy and strategy into deception. Because when the world expects order, unpredictability becomes your greatest weapon. The disciplined man builds his confidence from repetition. The Machiavellian builds his from readiness. Readiness is not the same as routine. Readiness means your clarity, timing, and awareness are so sharp that you can move precisely without needing permission from structure. That's real control. So here's the test. If someone took away your routines, no alarms, no systems, no rituals, would you still move with precision? Would you still know what to do? If the answer is no, your power isn't real. It's rented. The moment life shakes your routine, it will take your control with it. Machiavelli's student builds a different foundation. His power doesn't depend on structure. It depends on awareness and detachment. Awareness, the ability to read people, situations, timing, and tension. He studies the field like a hunter studies the wind. Detachment, the ability to let go of any plan the moment it stops producing leverage. No guilt, no pride, no hesitation. That's why he's uncatchable. Because his strength doesn't come from his system, it comes from his mind. He's disciplined when discipline creates momentum, but the second it turns into a cage, he burns it. He can be a machine for a season, a ghost the next. He can be precise one week, unpredictable the next. He can disappear for months, then return in perfect form, because he never lost awareness. He doesn't seek admiration. He seeks advantage. And advantage doesn't live in routine. It lives in timing. That's the Machiavellian reversal. Discipline may earn you respect, but only strategy earns you power. Discipline makes you visible. Strategy makes you untouchable. So when people praise your consistency, smile. But know that consistency is not the goal. Power is. Destroy what no longer serves you. Walk away from habits that no longer create leverage. Rewrite your rhythm before someone else learns it. That's not chaos. That's control. Because the man who can break his own rules at will is the only one who can never be ruled. And when they ask how you did it, how you stayed so focused, so sharp, so unshakable, don't explain. Don't motivate, just smile. Because while they're still measuring discipline, you'll already be measuring control, and you'll already be gone.